What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Devy Drafts YouTube channel. I'm your host, Kevin Coleman. I'm back with Christian Williams. We're doing a this or that, little Devy style, little college football, and we're going wide receivers today. We're going to be talking about these guys. Luther Burden, the wide receiver from Missouri. Evan Stewart, the wide receiver from Texas A&M. Who would you rather draft in Devy? Who do we think has a better outlook in terms of the NFL draft? Who are we drafting based on their NFL, potential? Because I think that's one thing Devy people get wrong. They could be good in college. It does not necessarily mean they're going to get the draft capital that we need. So we're going to be diving into it after the intro. Hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys on the other side. All right, we're going to be diving into these guys. Two of my favorite guys, but I have one favorite in here, but we'll get to that at the end. Can't spoil it now. But we're going to be talking about these guys. Very, very solid prospects, and they had pretty productive years. So we're going to be good looking at that. Right now, they're Devy ADP, and I'm going to say this about Devy ADP. It's kind of bullshit. Like, Devy ADP is one of those things that, like, it's out there and there's consensus. But when you get into a draft, like, go get your dudes in Devy. Like, if you're sitting at the 112, Burden's not going to come back to you or Evan Stewart. Draft Burden or Evan Stewart, especially the wide receiver position. Like, and I think they're really going back and forth. Like, realistically, wide receiver 5-6 is kind of where they're going. Whether that's at 206, 207, that's kind of here and there. It's really early second, middle second, kind of who you're drafting, but you're not getting either one. So the case maybe is like, hey, who do we want here? Like, are we taking Luther? Are we taking Evan Stewart? Who do we project here? Of a class, so when we're talking about the 25 class, that, they have some question marks in terms of overall where that value is going to be. But I do like their wide receiver class. This wide receiver class is pretty loaded. And if you're on our Patreon, we've actually dived into that, me and Jay Stein, some analytical breakdowns. He has all his analytical profiles on our Patreon to check that out. But let's get into it. So I'm going to talk about Luther a little bit, what he did last year. So when you look at his college production, 12 games, 45 receptions, 375 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Wasn't like a huge breakout that we like to see. Actually, Dominic Lovett, who transferred to Georgia, was probably the better wide receiver at Missouri last season. When you're looking at like there's just their profiles, first with Luther, his size, 5'11", 195, he hits that alpha BMI, what you look for, right? I know many people are starting to comp him to Deebo Samuel, like size wise. So that's kind of what they're looking at there. But from a college production, you see that, and you're going to see that, in terms of what he did last year was his, touchdown market share. He scored a lot of touchdowns last year, and that's where it's from, but not like a explosive production year. And I will say this just off the top before I let Christian talk about Evan Stewart. Me and Christian did not have Luther Burden as our wide receiver one last year. And we were kind of the only Devy guys that really didn't. A lot of people just was consensus Luther. We had this other guy. We had Evan Stewart as our wide receiver one. We got some shit for it. But why don't you give us kind of overall what's the college production from Evan look like?
Yeah, so 10 games, 53 receptions, 649 yards, 2 touchdowns. So a really productive year in what was a very bad Texas A&M quarterback team. I say really bad when you compare these two teams. I think actually Evan had the better situation, but in terms of what we would hope for from a Texas A&M offense, that certainly wasn't it. Evan Stewart came on and was immediately productive, and for a variety of reasons. But I think when he was walking into that room, there were a few established receivers. Now, also highly recruited back in their day, but not necessarily the most productive early in their careers. The fact that Evan Stewart was able to come in and kind of command quite a few targets, get a lot of receptions for this offense, I think you're pretty pleased with his output in year one.
Yeah, I mean, both these guys, offense is bad, quarterbacks, I would lean Evan because of Connor Weigman there and everything there. But yeah, exactly. Like, at least they did something, right? They weren't wide receiver zeros, and we know that. So we're going to be diving into kind of the tail of the tape. I'm going to be looking at Luther, just talking about what he did well, kind of his scouting, and from there, from a strengths perspective on him, I think the size is what stands out to me. Like, he's got that big frame. Like, when you're talking about what he can be, the 5'11", he's over 195, he's at 215, big kid. He's listed really big. Whether he's actually that big, that's a college tape to talk about. But he's got that size. I think, when you look at him too, yak ability, I do think he does that really well for his size. That's why he gets comped to Deebo a lot, because when you're looking at him from just that perspective, like, he does hit those numbers that you like to see from him in terms of like yak ability. Kind of they use him in sweeps. They'll get him out in space. Like, and for his size, you like that, especially from an NFL perspective. And then he did get the usage that you probably want to see. He didn't earn as many targets as you like. But again, he still hit those thresholds. Target market share was 20%. Reception market share was 18.3%. Yards market share was 14.3. The really thing is that he did hit that dominator. So that, dominator rating, what we like to see over 20, he had 28.6%. Now, there's a little bit of things about his profile, like touchdown market share was at 42%. So that definitely kind of, a little bit skews a little bit. Weighted dominator, though, he still found himself at 20%. So when you're looking at just from that perspective, from the numbers and from his yak and things that he does, he did look good last year. He hit that. Now, the question, I think, is like, what is that athleticism threshold going to be looking like for him in terms of like his production? How fast is he? Where's that 40 time going to be? Because necessarily that's going to be there. So speed testing, athleticism, what does that look like? And then, I think there's something to be said about him, like not producing elite numbers last year in an offense, and he didn't look like the best wide receiver. And I think, can he do that this year? Like, there's really, like, he's got to be that guy this year. Who the quarterback is probably going to be? It's probably going to be Jake Garcia, transfer Miami. Maybe Sam Horn gets in there and those other guys. But again, there's going to be a quarterback battle at Missouri. What does that look like going forward is going to be the interesting part. Theo Wees transferred there, former Oklahoma kid. And then, after that, there's really no one there. Dennis Jackson's there, but it's Luther. So how does he step up? I think that's going to be the biggest misnomer about like Luther Burden going forward. Like, who is he? Can he kind of step up and be that guy in this offense?
Yeah. I mean, I think, from a film perspective, excuse me, there were some things that were a little rough about his actual game that I think, concentration drops to me were pretty prevalent. And I think, when you look at the quarterback situation, you understand that how they used him, you kind of understand it.
Yeah.
A lot of people, he's going to get Deebo Samuel comps, I think, just with what he does after the catch. And so I'm curious to see what his usage looks like this year with actual quarterback play, like you said. So.
Yeah. All right, let's jump over to Evan. What do you like from him?
Everything, man. The only thing I don't like is his size. So we'll get that out of the way. He's a thin kid and he definitely plays like it at times. I don't think he's got all of the strength that you would like to see in your Devy wide receiver. Some of those guys that come out just completely rocked up immediately. But Evan Stewart, to me, a couple more years in this weight program, and you're looking at what I believe can be a dynasty wide receiver one. He's got the fluidity to get open. We talk about these wide receivers and what is the number one thing that the NFL is trending towards. It's guys getting open. Evan Stewart does it. If he doesn't, he is really, really nice at the catch point. He's got the ability to go up and get it. He's got a pretty wide catch radius, but you like everything about Evan Stewart's game when you watch him. We liked him as our wide receiver one last year. I think, the skinny guys always get comped to Devontae Smith. And I think, there are certain receivers where stylistically they're a little different despite being skinny. Stylistically, I think Evan Stewart does comp pretty well to Devontae Smith and how he wins. And, I think back to when Devontae made that one insane catch, falling out of the back of the end zone. Evan Stewart has a catch like that on his freshman film. It's not quite as remarkable, but, from a production perspective this year, I think you're more excited with Connor Wegman there. I think, taking over that quarterback room last year was very up and down. And when Wegman took over was kind of when you felt better about that A&M offense. I'm not certain that A&M is going to be good, but I am certain that connection is going to be there. And then when you look at, the NFL does like that production. I think they're going to be more excited about an Evan Stewart than they are a Luther Burden, not to spoil a pick here in a second.
Yeah, I mean, and when you're looking at Evan Stewart's, like his ADOT was 11.5, so we definitely saw that. Like, and you see that there. His slot percentage, he played on the outside and the inside there. PFF ranked him higher in terms of their grades. Like, he had pretty good receiver grades there. The only misnomer on his film, and the only thing that I saw, is drop percentage, 14%. Like that. Again, like on targets in terms of like what Connor Riegman was doing, but then it was Haynes King, those type of things you'd like to see. I will say this about Evan Stewart. Yeah, he's small. He's like a mix of Devonta and Jamar Chase. And I know that might be blasphemous with Jamar, but he plays like Jamar. He's got that I guess we'll say the analytical scale, that dog in him. Like he plays, he goes up, can play on the outside, and like when I watch him play, he's got a little bit of mix of both those dudes, and that's what excites me about him.
Yeah. Yeah. And, if you mix those two players, I think you have a pretty good wide receiver for
Pretty
Dynasty.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not bad. Like, and now, when you look at both of these guys, like if you're on the clock, who you grabbing? I'll go first on this one. I'm gonna stick with my wide receiver one to Evan Stewart. I'm gonna stay there. I think when you're looking at him, we've seen the NFL kind of shift towards these smaller wide receivers. We saw it this year. These draft capital guys are getting there. Look at Zay Flowers. Look at Jordan Addison, some of these guys, and his ability to kind of create space, get open, do those things. I think he's an alpha. Like, I think that he can come in and he's a really, really good wide receiver, and he's able to take over that room. Now, Luther's right there for me. Like, Burden is my, wide receiver too. I know some guys that don't have him there, but to me, they're 1A, 1B. But if I'm sitting on the clock, I'm okay taking Evan Stewart at the 112. I've done it in Devy leagues where, depending on where the value is, I'm going to take Evan Stewart. So I'm okay taking Evan Stewart at that mark. I'm going to take him in these drafts because I do think he profiles really well in the NFL. He's got a better, now, I don't necessarily, Bobby Petrino being back and being in that wide receiver room, I think that he's the alpha. Like when you're looking at just overall on that depth chart there, I like Moose Muhammad, Noah Thomas, everything there, but Evan's going to be that guy. And he's already kind of proved that he can be that guy in a bad offense. So if they get a little bit better, Jimbo kind of gets himself together, and Pro Set gets him out there, I'm going to lean Evan Stewart.
Yeah, I already spoiled my pick. I'm going Evan Stewart as well. Like I said, we were kind of in on him as the wide receiver one, and then he kind of went out there and showed that was correct, at least in year one. I think Luther's got room to grow, and I'm excited about what Luther can be as well. When I look at my combined rankings, which you can find on our Patreon at patreon.com/the Royale, I have Evan Stewart pretty comfortably inside my top 20 wide receivers in terms of, I think he is going to be a legit dynasty asset very, very quickly. I think he's going to be the top receiver in that class. I have Luther Burden down in the 30s. So there is kind of a bit of a tier break for me. And so if I'm looking at these two in a draft, I am always going to take Evan Stewart. I've done it. And, I'd even take him for college fantasy leagues. I don't know what that value looks like right now, but I think he's going to be productive this year. And like I said, once you get that, big jump in a sophomore year, I think you're looking at a guy he's going to get first round draft capital. Now, Burden's got that athleticism. I think he's also going to get the first round draft capital. It's just what type of player are you getting? I think Stewart profiles to have the more lucrative fantasy career once he hits the big leagues in the NFL.
Yeah, and Keyshawn Boutte has got me a little spooked, to be honest with you. Like we've seen that, and like Burden, I know, I get it, but like we've seen that. The only thing I think Burden could do, I think maybe Burden's going to transfer. He probably should have transferred this year. If we're going to be real, we're going to keep this 100. He should have transferred, got out of there, Missouri. I know he's loyal to that school. I get it. But realistically, he maybe should have gone somewhere else. If he does that, then we could be talking about, oh, he took that big jump, and we'll see that next year. But right now, if I'm taking anybody, it's Evan Stewart. Like that's just kind of how I look. Go and stick with my ranking, stick with my gut on this one, and go from there. So. Appreciate you guys. Check out our Patreon below. Check out, Underdog. Use our code Royale for up to $100 match. We'll be back on another this or that later. But until then, hit that like and subscribe button. We'll see you guys later.